Hi, welcome to Rainbow Space Magic Con 3.0. This is the creature creation, alien fantasy creatures that represent diverse identities panel. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Heather O'Malley. I write all sorts of things. I have a contemporary novel coming out in June, but I have a fantasy adventure novel that'll be coming out of fall of next year. So there's that to look forward to. And to introduce our other panelists, let's go with E. Robert Dunn.
I have to unmute myself first.
Yes, that would help.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm E. Robert Dunn. I'm a published author, produced playwright, and also an actor. I guess I'm most famous for my 14-book sci-fi series called Echelon Zen, which is very other-centric, if you will, gay, lesbian-centric. I've written 2 off-Broadway plays. I've started 2 nonprofits, and it's an honor to be here.
Okay, S.I. Clarke.
Hello, hi, it's Sai.
Sai.
Hello, I am Sai. I write science fiction. My current series features an ace, a gender human main character who finds herself and her dog in a strange alien big world after they get kidnapped by a bunch of bunnies. They discover that things are really weird, and the binary that people are used to on Earth does not apply to alien races, and they think it's very strange that anyone would use different pronouns depending upon which they don't even have a word for gender, most other species. And my next book coming out in November is called Consider Pegasus, and it is all about skeledivergence amongst a sort of vaguely equine race, and has a villain inspired by J.K. Rowling.
Okay, and that takes us to our last panelist here, M.D. Grimm.
Hi, I'm M.D. Grimm. I mostly write fantasy, sci-fi, and paranormal series. I am trying to branch out into single titles, but I seem to be long-winded, and so I keep making the series longer and longer. I live next to a train, so if I suddenly mute myself, it's because the train is like doing its thing. So just in case you hear any weird rumblings, it's that. Right now, I mostly write MM, but I want to branch out into other identities and other pairings and really just give everyone the romance that they need and they deserve. So I have big plans. I hopefully will have a book coming out in October. It's crossing that deadline. I'm very excited. So got a lot of work before I do that. And then most likely that's the last book this year, but I have probably about 4 that I want to release next year because I am nothing if not ambitious. So.
Awesome. Okay, so the idea of this panel was to cover some of the do's and don'ts for creating alien fantasy creatures that represent diverse identities without othering them. So to that, let's start with, as a first question, what should you avoid? Anyone want to jump in?
Well, I'd say stereotypes. I mean, I think it's I guess for me, that's an obvious thing. Try not to write stereotypes unless they're absolutely essential to your story. And I would say avoid creating a world that we here on Earth just can't relate to. We have to have some ability to understand what you're writing. You know, when you're reading it as a reader, you need to know what, if you can't identify with the universe that's been created for you, you're not going to speak to an audience. Right? Those are my 2 main avoidances. You have to make it real.
Sai or MD?
I was thinking of one of the don'ts that I try to do is making the aliens the diverse ones and not the human characters. I think diversity should be across the board, but then the aliens should take it kind of a step further and have a different sort of diversity that might not be considered human or might not be considered in our current society. Which is kind of where I went with my current sci-fi series, Saga of the Bold People, is I based my alien species off insects and top predators. So, and it would helped me with the look of them as well as possible societal structures, because insects obviously have either hive mind or more different ideas of that. And then the top predators too could, you know, also the appearance as well as pack or herd or pride structure. And so I don't know how in depth I want to go into this, but yeah, so I try to be diverse in a different way, but also as we go through the series and see more human characters, I involve more human characters in this whole thing. I wanted to show what the diversity that's more, I guess, commonplace or more what we're more familiar with, human diversity. So, but I wanted them to then the humans, when they're more talking to the aliens and actually getting more familiar with the aliens, they realize, oh, we actually want some of more of that and more of that diversity, and to actually incorporate what they do like into their own society to make it better, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of where I'm trying to do with this one specifically.
Yes, I'll answer, and then Sai, you can close up this question. For me, in the book, I have the fantasy novel coming out next year, Hands of the Morai. One of my point of view characters is a raven. And I don't know its sexuality. It's a freaking raven. I'm literally trying to write as accurate a bird as possible. And that is such a pain in the ass. And so things you might not want to do is might not want to hurt your brain by really trying to embody, you know, another species. Because there, you know, if you do the research, there's a lot of stuff out there, but it's hard to get your head into a different viewpoint because it's alien to us. And so, you know, that's, I think, touches on the point Robert made about, you know, try not to make it too diverse or too out there, because you might make it something that can't be connected. And so that is very important. But yeah, also, to your point as well, that's one of the things I was going to talk about is don't just have the alien race or the other be the diverse one. You have to show it across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so yeah, I just shared both of the ideas so far. Sai?
Yeah, so I remember what my answer was going to be, although I don't. Oh, some of the things to avoid. I remember
Yes,
my
avoid.
answer, but I couldn't remember the question. So in my, sorry, in my previous book, the second in the series, choking on cereal I ate. Excuse me.
Okay, so Sai is trying to save herself.
Avoid choking. That's
that is a really important thing when you're writing, to avoid choking.
Yeah.
Because then you just key smash, and it's not very helpful as a writing technique.
Yeah.
Sai, are you ready?
Sorry. So yeah, in my previous book, the second in this series, I had group of now friends, found family, taking on a job, joining a mission to rescue a colony planet before it got hit by an asteroid. And while they're working there, they discover that there's a second species on the planet, and they need to factor them into the rescue mission. And then it turns out that this species is actually being oppressed and enslaved by the species that called them there. And the basis that they use for justifying their enslavement of this fully sapient species is the fact that these people don't speak audibly, they use sign language. And so I was really cautious that I didn't want to give the appearance of anything unintended, or and so I worked with a number of sensitivity readers on that. I worked with a Black deaf sensitivity artist and a First Nations sensitivity reader for that, because I was very aware that I did not want to accidentally create a white savior trope. I did not want to accidentally misrepresent deaf people, even though my characters weren't deaf, and even though they weren't Black, and even though they weren't First Nations. It was very important to me that I not accidentally give that impression. And that those sensitivity readers that I worked with were absolutely brilliant in helping me. I mean, if you go on writers' forums, you'll see this topic comes up a lot, either sensitivity readers or content warnings. And people get so irate because they think this is about censorship or, free speech. And no, they can't stop you from being racist. They can't stop you from being a homophobic, transphobic, otherphobic, everything, right? They can't. What they can do is help you learn where you're accidentally displaying biases that you didn't know you had, or that you knew you had, but were trying to work through. And so those are things that I think are really, really important.
Yeah. So after talking about the don'ts, let's go to what makes a good other. So when you're creating these characters that are a step removed, whatever their sexuality, whatever their culture, whatever intersexual place they come into, what makes a good other, something different from what people know? Let's start with, well, whoever feels ready to jump in first. Wow.
So what's an other? Let's define what is other.
That's an excellent place to start.
That would help me.
To a lot of readers, the other is anything that is not cis, het, Western, Christian.
I would argue against that, actually. The other is whatever the reader is not, right? It's helping the reader see another perspective. And we're used to I guess the opposite of the other would be the same, being that cis, het, white, Judeo-Christian, blah, blah, blah. But if the reader isn't those things, then the other would be perhaps some of those things. So the other is anything that takes you outside yourself as a reader.
Okay.
I argue with everything. It's what I do.
No. That's how panels work, and it's important. It's an important point of view, because you're right. Every reader brings their own everything to it. But as writers, we have to deal with our own conceptions and our own ideas of what creates an other, which is like, for me, what makes a good other character is, I try to think about people I've met from foreign countries, and how some of their speaking came at things in directions I did not personally experience, or when learning other languages, emphasis on things that I didn't think of before as primary because my language, being American English, has a certain framework and a certain point of view. So all these things I've done, meeting different cultures, all these things, I try to reach out to those experiences to create my others, but I don't want to steal identities. So for me, what makes a good other character is an author's experiences and an author's willingness to do that deep dive research into something different and something outside of their experience. Because as writers, all we can draw on is our experience and our research when creating something not us.
For my opinion, then I would follow up on that. I would avoid creating exactly what we have here on Earth. Do you ever notice in Star Trek, every single alien species has the exact same ethnic diversity that we do?
Or they basically look like humans with
Yes.
spoons on their head, or attachments on their ears, or attachments on the top of their head, or they look like humans, but.
Right? There are Asian Vulcans, there are African American Vulcans, there are Caucasian Vulcans. It's like, really?
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Oh
no, go ahead.
That's just one thing I would diversity that we have here on Earth, because that always annoys me.
Yeah, for me, all I can draw on is my sci-fi series that I'm currently in the thick of right now. But wanting to have certain points of perhaps similarity for the reader to be like, okay, I understand that, but then have many other points that might be just a little bit, different from what general human societies seem to have. So it's for me, it was trying to find that balance between what you can, attach yourself to, especially in a romance. When you have a romance between a human and an alien, for me, there needed to be some sort of similarity, some sort of mutual linking points, and then having each of them learn from each other.
No
about
pun intended.
What was that?
I said no pun intended. Linking point.
No,
yeah, that was
intend your
actually not
pun.
That was actually not intentional, but that was good. I'm glad someone had to make a pun about aliens.
You have to. Come on.
So yeah, just trying to find that the points where they understood each other, and then perhaps those points they realized they didn't have, but then because of the language barrier or perhaps conceptual cultural barriers, they realize, oh, we have the same sort of idea, but we call it or consider it different things. So it was just that meshing of the culture. So for me, as a reader and as a writer, a good other is points of familiarity, and then points of like, oh, well, I need to understand that more. What? And then you learn more as with the character.
Sai, anything to add?
I think an other is sort of taking the human experience and trying to apply ideas outside yourself into kind of metaphor. And I don't know, it's a tough one. So one of the things I asked when I was first writing the first book in this series is, I went on Twitter and I was like, if you were confronted with an alien race, explain gender to them. Because what even is gender? Because this is a question I often ask myself and people around me. What even is gender? I don't understand. I describe myself as gender exempt. And I couldn't answer it. And I ended up writing that directly into the book. This human character who is agender sits down and tries to explain the concept of gender to someone from an alien race. And the best they could come up with was that it was some sort of caste system that you were assigned to when you were born.
Wow. Okay.
Or it's like Gilliam on Star Trek, the masculine, the feminine, trying to understand us from his. Remember that Star Trek episode?
Yeah.
Where they meet Nagilum and he looks at them and says, "Shaw, tall, short, fat, wide, masculine, feminine." He's trying to put it all together. I guess it's a matter of perspective, depending on where you're coming from, right? Is gender masculine and feminine, or is it more than that?
Okay, well, that actually
or is it just made up and it doesn't exist at all?
That absolutely.
It's all about roles. Do you make bread? Do you go out hunt? Do you gather? I guess, it depends on roles that you play, right? In society and in relationships.
And that leads to, how do you create an interesting creature or cultures that are not just a projection of our others, with our human identity? How do you, play with those and create them?
Well, I mean, I think by answering questions like this, and I always go back to Star Trek, I don't mean to, but even in the episode where they had the black and white faces, that was a great episode because where he's black on the left and I'm black on the right, which we as humans would go, huh? But to them, it was a big deal. So creating identities that we are struggling with ourselves that either societies have resolved or they themselves are like, really, that's what you're focusing on? That's really a priority for you? Might make a good identity. Or, then there's also the evolutionary track. You create a race that has been where we are, and they look back at us as if like children who are still learning their steps, or vice versa. We are the characters in your story, or the omniscient ones compared to the other characters in your story, which would be like primitives or cave people. Those also make good identities, I believe. And when I'm writing, I try to build bridges and tear down walls from what we're struggling with in our society today. Again, it goes back to make it relatable. And that's the beauty of science fiction and fantasy, is you can solve all the problems of the world in your writing because you have all the answers, and you can create races that have all the answers, and you're right always because I'm writing the book. But I think those are good identities, in my opinion, of where we could go, or where we've been, or the alternative reality. What happens if the Nazis had won World War II? What would happen if somebody, a key person in society, hadn't died? What would that reality have been? And then you put that on an alien world and let them role play that out, and then have someone maybe from our world encounter that, and then you get the perspectives and the conversations that come from that. Like create a Handmaid's Tale on an alien.
Yeah, like with fantasy, which I write a good bit of. One of the questions is the culture that you have created. I mean, these people live in a different land entirely than yours, so their culture and their perceptions and what to them is other is different. And so I think it's important when you're creating different characters and different points of view, that if you're also changing the baseline for your series, what does that do? Like in this series I'm working on, the fantasy series that's coming out next year, one of the considerations is with gender, they have a concept known as lost brothers or lost sisters, where somewhere in the process of getting born, your body may not match. And so instead of it being a big deal, when you realize it, there is actually a ritual that most of the faiths on this planet can do, called the ritual of finding, which is you go through this ritual and you get the body you were supposed to have. That's it. That's how big a deal being trans is. So my consideration is Well, what the hell does that make trans? How does trans happen? What do they think about it as a culture? And from that point, then I have to consider, now what the hell do these people consider other?
And also think about just things that we do every day, common wise, that we think are just normal, might be offensive to somebody else, like eating together. What we do with our mouths could be very offensive to an alien. You, oh my God, I saw you put something in that orifice that we use for this other intimate act. Ah, how could you do that in a public space? Ah, or we're exploring those identities and other cultures, I think would be relatively very interesting, like how we handle nakedness, how we handle the intermixing of our genders, our sexes. Some cultures, women stay with women and men stay with men, and there's only one reason to get together, and any other time is, oh my God, you actually sit beside them on a bus. Oh my God, you work beside them in an office. Ah, I mean, I think that would be, those identities would be interesting to explore.
Yeah,
I mean, I've often thought this about.
SI?
Oh, sorry. Not trying to interrupt there.
You're saying?
In my series, Lem, my main character, is the only one who wears clothes. No one else wears clothes, and they can't understand why she wears clothes. And the only way she's been, at one point, she's asking if there's some clothes she can change into, and no one understands what she's talking about. And the best that they can come up with in terms of trying to explain this is blanket armor. It's armor made of blankets. But yeah,
I explore that too. Yeah.
Different things that people don't, that you wouldn't stop to think. And there's reference made to another race that thinks it's, as you pointed out, Robert, the idea that you can see inside someone else's mouth, that they just think that's vulgar. And there are all kinds of species with just all kinds of little differences, things that are perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable, but then things that aren't. And in the next book, there's just this throwaway line of someone who is like, oh, when I first left my home planet, I saw someone reach for something with her right hand, and I stood up and I sang the song of shunning. Because being right-handed is, you're not allowed to be right-handed. Yeah, just lots of little things. And then I've got this, the focus of the next book is all about this species that is just not open to diversity. They're very conformy. But then there's just this throwaway bit of, oh, well, yeah, people can change sex. Yeah, we allow that. That's totally normal.
I explore the I guess, the inhibition or the taboo of being naked within a family group. So in one of my books, I have a family that's marooned on an alien planet. They're fixing their ship, and they say, we need a break. We just need to lie around and just be comfortable and get to know each other. So they all take off all their clothes and they run around as a family naked, or they land on this other planet and they all decide to go take a bath in a stream. They all get naked in front of each other and go out and skinny dip together. And I had a fan go, I would never do that with my family. I mean, you'll do it with strangers, but you won't get naked in front of your mother and father. That was a huge concept that someone thought, and for me, it was a throwaway, because that's just part of their culture. They had no inhibition or taboo about being naked around their own family members because they're all family. What's the big deal? You know, we go to work, we put on our uniforms, but when we come home and we want to relax, we take those off and we are just naked around each other. So I explored that. And then you brought up another point about not understanding gender. I created a storyline, a cyborg who doesn't understand anything but sameness, because everyone else he knows is just like him because they come off an assembly line. So he didn't understand diversity as far as individuality, personality, sexes, all that. And they have to kind of teach him about the strength in diversity, because all he knew was, or it knew, was strength in sameness.
MD, do you have anything to add?
Just for some reason, just Robert's comment on the naked among family and that it was just a normal thing. I realized I did something similar without knowing about it. And in my Shifter Chronicles series, I actually have an historical one, I think in the 1700s in England, and it's wolf shifters. And so they've been running all the outside all the time as wolves, and then they're coming in at dawn and they're just shifting back to humans naked, not care, you know, because it's their pack. They don't care. They're just lounging around, having a good time, and then they're gonna go to bed. But it was like 1700s gentry in England. Like that's like what? So I realized I did, and it was like the first chapter or something that I did that in. But it was because they were wolf shifters. They weren't. They put on the human persona, you know, amongst the gentry and everything, but because they were living on the countryside, so they weren't living in London or something. They didn't have people just like always like gossiping about them, so they could just be themselves, free and without inhibition. So yeah, that I guess I did something like that with like not even knowing about it.
Well,
People walk around London naked all the time. Let me tell you.
oh yeah, it's normal.
I live in the middle of London. It's yeah.
But
Given
in the 1700s,
That's why you got to love Europeans. You got to love.
I do live in the 21st century, not the 1700s. But yeah.
well, given the nudity taboo discussion that we've just kind of slid into, I guess that leads right to: do you add any language or cultural quirks, such as why wear clothes?
Or when to wear them. When is it appropriate to wear clothing? When is it not appropriate to wear clothing? It's like the Golden Girls episode when they went away to the nudist colony. You were nude except at dinner. And when they arrived nude at dinner. You know, and I think also languages and gestures is also important to put in there. Has anyone ever traveled to Asia? When I went to South Korea, they give you a whole list of gestures, hand gestures that you can and cannot do because it's found offensive. Who would have thought doing this is
Wow, Robert, your connection is rather mechanical. But I think I get what you're going, because like in the military, I was trained as an Arabic linguist. So they also make clear in your cultural classes, don't reach for anything with your left hand, especially food or don't shake someone's hand. So if you're left-handed, you can't use your left hand in a lot of things, because especially like over in like Saudi Arabia or someplace like that, they might get very offended. It means nothing to you, but it means everything to them. And so these cultural quirks, I think, really do some fun expanding on the world and the characters. So yeah, or is there a phrase every says, like, again, because I was an Arabic linguist, when you look at things written about the Prophet Muhammad, praise be upon him, yeah, that's how he's addressed. The Prophet Muhammad, praise be upon him, because that is how they hold this person in standing in society, is they always follow up, you know, that descriptor with praise be upon him. Well, does your society have something like that? Does this other society we're interacting with do that? And so you have to, I think, look at yourself and be like, well, when I hear this, it kind of makes me kind of go, yeah. I'm like, well, hell yeah, I'm going to add that, because, you know, I think people need to get over that.
Make your audience uncomfortable. Make the reader uncomfortable. Make them think. Make them stretch. It's like going to live theater. Your audience should be a little disturbed.
Yeah. but only a little. Yeah,
A
MD,
little, yeah.
you were
Enough for them
about
to
to
want to
jump
buy the
in.
next book of the series.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
make people so uncomfortable, they're just going to put the book down. But you can get
Yeah.
away with making
Yeah.
readers a bit uncomfortable. I mean, I like
Yeah,
to
poke
do that.
the bear, but only some.
Yeah, poke the bear only so much.
Right, poke the bear, but only so much. not smoke
Yeah,
the bear.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
From
MD,
a
you were saying, or Sai, you had something?
I was just going to say off of your, Heather, what you were saying about the left hand. I have a coworker who went to India and she's left-handed. And so it was very much of a struggle for her to especially eat with her right hand when it's her left is her dominant. And there are reasons why they don't use their left hand when they eat. So she was definitely talking about the struggle of the cultural and just changing her entire way of, just living when she was over there because of that taboo. So yeah, when you mentioned that, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that just made me think of a real life experience someone told me about. And I'm like, oh my God, I would not have thought of that.
Or if you eat what they call continental European style, where you use your left and your right hand, as opposed to America, where you cut, cross over, and then eat. Some people don't eat that way. I don't eat that way. I eat with both hands.
I've learned both because I spent a lot of time in Germany, and so for me it's eating that's normally, but I also will revert, and I tend to do it unconsciously depending on around the people I'm with.
Just to tag on to the quirks, cultural quirks and languages in our stories, I had a really fun time coming up with such things because the best part about sci-fi and fantasy is you can make things up and just have a ball with it. So for me, one of the species, only humans smile. No other species in my universe smiles because showing teeth is a domineering, like is an aggressive gesture. So
Do they have an equivalent?
In their own species they do, in the different cultures. Yeah. Okay. So the main ones that I deal with is a love interest to the human main character. He learns how to smile to communicate with his human partner, but he doesn't show his teeth. It's just the lips that go up, because for him still showing teeth is very aggressive, because top predators, wolves, lions, showing teeth is like, I'm going to eat you kind of thing.
It's like with cats, they do the slow blink.
Yeah.
that's their equivalent.
Yeah. So so it's very funny when my human character sometimes forgets himself and smiles, then he's like, oh, whoa, not aggressive, like I'm not starting crap right now, like no, we're fine, we're good, like so he learns how to be very impassive with his expressions so he doesn't trigger anything. So that was a fun experience, just like, and then having the human, that the alien partner that was trying to win him over is like, I know how to smile, you like kind of thing, like I'm friendly. But then that alien also purrs because I had elements of cats in there. So my human now has understand the different tempos of purrs for communication of, I'm trying to comfort myself, I'm trying to comfort you, I'm very happy, so, and then I just took noises and actually put emotions to them. So then the human character learned how to interpret them and kind of do and hum to try to convey in that communication.
I did very similar to that with some of my species. So I have the best friend of my main character is she's this equine race, and so she's sort of always tossing her mane, but she doesn't. They have they don't, things that we think of as normal, they don't nod, they don't shrug their shoulders. So I'm constantly having to come up with new body language for that. But some of because most of my characters I've sort of gone, oh, it looks a bit like a parrot or a bit like a horse, or I mainly use body language drawn from whatever I've used as the inspiration. But then I've got one character who is just well, she's described as being like a glitter bomb went off in an oil slick. And so for her, I used color shifting. So, oh, she's red, that means she's sad, or, you know, blue is the dominant color and that means something else. And so I've had to learn how to convey, and hopefully convey it well enough to my readers that they understand, but to convey emotion and a mind state using body language that is different than human.
When I was working on The Hands of the Morai with my Raven character, Nibs, I was researching what biologists have found in the wild. And like this one biologist who I was like, oh, dude, he spent several years recording every sound that a raven made and what was going on at the same time.
Do they do the pupil thing?
They sometimes, but like the different calls that they make, because ravens have very expanded vocal cords and can even speak like humans and carry on conversations. Apparently they're as smart as an 8-year-old, which is terrifying and awesome. So I'm using this whole list of like 32 sounds, and like the person saying this sound is given when they're attacking something, and this sound is given when they're trying to you know, get someone's attention, and this sound, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that can be really a
Disney
big
Plus
resource.
has a show called Supernatural.
Yeah. Yes, Robert.
So I was saying on Disney Plus, they have a show called Supernatural, and they explore all the ways that animals and trees and plants communicate.
Yeah, something like that. Because I mean, if we're going to write these diverse creatures and try to have points of connection, we should look at what they're actually doing. So the last question I have for everyone is, how intersectional do you make these identities? I mean, do you have them cross over and also be disabled? Rich, poor, tall, short? I mean, where do they cross? Are they straight? Are they, you know, gay? What does that mean in their culture? So how do you add layers?
I want to answer first. So with my main alien species, they are all bisexual. So they are supposed to mate with the opposite sex to breed, you know, but also it is supposed to be a loving relationship. You know, scent is a very, very important part of it. If the scents don't match, if you don't like you know, the smell of that person, you're not going to mate with them. It's just not going to happen. So it's very much scent based and compatibility based. But should you need more emotional support outside of that mating, you're only allowed to go after the same sex because of population control, because of bigger universe reasons that I'm not getting into. But so they're all bisexual. For them, it means nothing to have different lovers, I guess, you know, but you could only have your mate, your official mate is always the opposite sex, but then you have unofficial mates, which are the same sex. So that was fun to have my human realize that and go, okay, because I mean, he grew up among
But they're
aliens,
denobulin, in other words.
so he knows.
They're denobulin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he knows, like, he's grew up among aliens, not really humans. So he knows they're a different variety, but just learning that his current partner had other relationships, and he's like, are you casual about this? Or is this, you know, so then is trying to figure out what that means, and, you know, accepting it, because that is literally part of the culture and the species itself.
Sai, Robert, anything to add?
Well, it depends. I've written anthology series where I've modeled after nature where certain fish can change their gender. So I've created a storyline in which that happens. I've created the nuclear family. I've tried to mimic what we have. So I've tried to touch on everything in the various stories that I've written, but again, to make it relatable to an earthling reader. So I've talked about bisexuality, I've talked about transgenderism, I've talked about heterosexuality, homosexuality. In fact, my Echelon Zen series, 70% of this utopian society is not straight. Only 30% is straight and only 30% reproduces. 70% don't because you live to 200 years of age. So to be a responsible society, so you're in balance with nature, you don't overpopulate a place. That destructive event, and it's not for everybody, and not everyone is meant to be a parent. And if not, then go explore and cure cancer. Become another contributor to society than just making babies. So I've explored that. I've explored religion and the role of religion with the last presidential election that we had just before the one we had now, with the mindset that this America was in under the celebrity You're Fired star. I wrote a whole two books on a society that was ruled by that type of mindset. What if you stumbled on a planet that was ruled by a party that believed the way that party believed? And for my characters, it was frightening. They couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Yeah, so my characters, I try to make sure that they're intersectional in all kinds of different ways. So they come in different heights and different, like within one species, different heights, different shapes, different. To one of the species, they have 6 sexes, and Lem says to this person when she finds out that she comes from a species with 6 sexes, she says, "What does sexual orientation even look like in a species with 6 sexes?" And Bexley looks at her and says, "I don't understand. How does a compass tell you whether or not you're attracted to someone?" And just, so I try to make sure that different abilities, different disabilities. I have the relationship between my main character and her dog. No one understands it. And so people are always like, "Your spouse, your child." At one point, she's being interrogated and they're trying to ask her, "What's the nature of your relationship between the relationship between you and Spock?" And she's trying to explain, "Well, she's my dog." And they don't understand, and it just keeps going round and round. And finally, she's my dog. I own her. And this then becomes like, this is just, she's basically admitted she's slaving. And when they eventually become a crew, the dog is a full-fledged member of the crew with a job and a salary, and everywhere they go, for some reason, species look at humans and are like, "What is that? Is that a tree?" But they treat the dog as the you must be the person in charge here.
Excellent. I mean, and chat brought up some interesting things about how an alien society might define disability, and if you're not a telepath in a telepathic society, how is that like being deaf in this one? So it clearly shows there is a lot of directions you can go when you're creating these creatures and alien races and alien identities and points of view. And so play with everything. Try to have a lot of fun. Thank you, all of you, for being a part of this panel. I thought it was some really interesting discussion. Thank you, Cy Clarke. God, I'm going to get it one of these days.
Thank you.
Cy Clarke. Thank you, Robert Dunn. Thank you, MD Grimm, for some really engaging conversation.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, for moderating.